welcome to a new webinar series from Amplify Media. This is called We Gather Together, How Small Groups Bring Connection to the Post-Pandemic Church. My name is Ryan Dunn. I'll be your host for the next couple sessions, and in these two episodes, we're going to discuss how small groups can help re-energize your churches as we gather together again, both in person and still online, even after the past year and a half. In this first episode, I'm joined by Bill Gray, who is the director of Grow Ministries at Flores United Methodist Church in Herndon, Virginia. There you are, Bill. How are you?
I'm fine, Ryan. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Very excited to be here.
Yeah, me too. Thanks for having me.
You bet. We're also joined by Michelle Pope, and Michelle is a lay leader, capital L, capital leader, in the California Nevada Conference of the United Methodist Church. She's also the CEO of Alzheimer's Services of the East Bay. Michelle, thank you so much for joining us.
It's great to be here with you and Bill, and thank you for having me.
You bet. Well, I'm excited for this conversation with the both of you. Most churches are again meeting together in person in some way, shape, or form. But as we continue to work through what we hope are the final days of the pandemic, and we can all lift up a prayer and knock on some wood for that, many churches are looking for ways to encourage people to return to in-person gathering, whether that be in worship or in discipleship in some way. They're also trying to stay connected with folks who might choose to stay at home, whether that be for pandemic-related reasons or because they've moved into a digital first or digitally centered culture. So with that in mind, I would love to know what your churches or ministries have planned for this fall and for staying connected with people. And Bill, why don't we start with you?
Sure. Well, those are all great questions. They're great opportunities that we have, and there really are some great challenges. I think the pandemic has definitely taught us a lot about what it means to be in connection with people, what it means to have community. And on the bright side, I would say I believe very strongly that we proved that you can have meaningful and deep community in a virtual experience. I think that we have also seen that in worship, quite frankly. So it has helped us to shift, I think, a little bit of what we considered online to be and the experiences of online. But I agree with you that there's a big push and a desire to be physically connected. And so, for our church, we are trying to offer, I guess, a wide variety of ways for people to be able to do that. And not to say that we didn't do that prior, but I think we're doing it in a much more intentional way, a much more planned way of being able to recognize that perhaps in this new world, while people want to be together in groups, they may not be comfortable being in a larger group. So we may have to have multiple group settings that limit the amount of people in it for people to feel comfortable, but we still want to offer that. So we'll do that. We are also toying with and piloting right now during the summer some of our smaller groups to be hybrid. So for those people that do want to meet in person or have the opportunity to, stop at church on their way home or stop at their destination of whoever's hosting their small group, while others cannot, they can still participate. So we're seeing that as an option too. So I think kind of creativity of being able to offer a wide variety of things are really what is going to keep most of our folks connected. So that's.
And Michelle, what do you hear happening across the California Nevada conference? How are churches connecting you?
As the conference lay leader, I have the privilege and honor of visiting all of our churches throughout the Cal Nevada conference. And through the last 18 months doing that through Zoom was interesting. I actually got to see more people because I didn't have to travel as much throughout the Cal Nevada conference, which takes up many, many hours of commute. But I also, flip side, I think people really liked the fact that they could get up and go to church at any time, and they didn't. There were some people who said, I didn't have to commute, or our small groups where people weren't able to be a part of the small group when they traveled or when they did something different. They now were involved in the small group, even though they were not living in the area because they chose to shelter in place somewhere else. So I agree with Bill wholeheartedly that it's a new paradigm that we're looking at, that having both, and it's like the hybrid car, that's becoming, that we are becoming a hybrid communities of faith, where we're going to be doing face-to-face things, but we're also going to have to think about how we enrich our online presence for those individuals, whether they be ill, elderly, people who are disabled, whatever prevents them from coming to the building, that we're still taking worship, small groups, and the word of God to them.
Yeah. I think a lot of us have grown comfortable with the idea of worship being something that's hybrid, both in person and online. But it seems a little bit more challenging to adapt an idea or a practice like small groups to something that is hybrid. So I'd like to take a look backwards before we start looking forwards in kind of exploring what has been your church's or your ministry's experience with small groups pre-pandemic, and then what continued during the pandemic, and then maybe we can start to look at where we go post-pandemic or whatever comes next, right? So let's look back. What was your church's or ministry's experience with small groups pre-pandemic?
Michelle? Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Bill. All of our small groups were primarily held on the church campus. And so everybody would come to the church campus, and all the small groups would meet whatever day, whatever time in the evening, Saturday, Sunday after church or before church. There were groups that also met in the home. Small groups that met in individuals' homes, and they would rotate that through depending on the number of folks in the group. And then there were groups similar to the groups that I'm a part of, where we did both, where we would meet together possibly once a month, but then all the other weeks we would use Zoom. We were using Zoom before it became the thing to use. So that's kind of where we were prior to the pandemic. So I'll let Bill talk about his previous.
No, I think that's very very similar. We had the vast majority of our groups also met on property, primarily in the evenings. Our church we made a commitment years and years and years ago to trying to remove as many barriers to people meeting in groups, and one of those were childcare. And so we offer childcare on property. So that's as an incentive for people to be able to utilize the building. But we have groups that met offsite as well, and it was robust. We have been really working on instilling the ethos, I guess, of having small groups, and really having that be one of your primary discipleship areas, one of those primary areas where you're really making deep connections with others, and wrestling with what it means to live a Christian life in today's day and age. So yeah, I would say that we had a lot of different flavors. We definitely were not as progressive as Michelle in using Zoom before the pandemic, but yeah.
Well, so Bill, it sounds like then it was a bit of a disruption. That's an understatement. A bit of a disruption when the pandemic happened to the flow of your small groups. So how did your practice of small groups change at Flores when the pandemic struck?
Well, it was, I think, a lot of fear and trepidation at the very beginning, kind of that feeling of, oh my goodness, what are we going to do? I will say one of the things that really we did benefit greatly from was signing up for Amplify, not to give a plug, but it was something that our church was starting to utilize because of the fact that so much curriculum was moving online. And nobody wanted to have to go through the ordering process. So we had actually just completed training almost all of our small group leaders on how to access Amplify for when they were going to be running a Lenten group, for instance. That's what we were getting ready to do. So we had a little bit under our belts in terms of being able to train our small group leaders. But what we did was really reach out to every single one of them. We asked them, what were your plans? If you were to be able to go online, if we could help you get up and running, what do you think you would do? And I would say the vast majority said, geez, I don't know how to do that. And so it did take some time in terms of, here's how you can do it. Let us show you how to do that. We quickly did videotaping of tutorials, etc. Now, luckily, we lived with a pretty adept, I'd say, congregation, and a lot of our leaders are professionals, and so they were used to those types of tools. But I would say that even for smaller churches, it is something that is not at all hard to teach somebody how to use. And so we were really up and running with, I would say, about 90% of our groups within just a few weeks after the decision that we were stay in place kind of decision was made, including the ones that didn't think that they could do it, because the technology is relatively simple to use, as long as somebody has a computer, right? So there may be some of those things, but the vast majority of people had one and were able to really learn how to get into gear. And then it was a learning curve, to be honest. It was a learning curve to just, how do you create community? How do you speak without talking over each other? How do you learn to use the mute button? We all went through the Zoom education, and all of our groups were no different. I think to some degree we were helped by the fact that, everybody kind of had to go online. Businesses went online, wherever you worked were online. For many people, I mean, there was obviously people who were still working in person. Schools were online. So it helped that everything was moving in that direction, I would say. So we did benefit, I think, from the wave to Zoom.
Well, Michelle, in your experience, it sounded like your groups were kind of platformed to meet remotely before they were forced to meet remotely. Was there a change in participation levels when the pandemic hit in your small groups?
It actually increased because, again, in California, travel time is a big issue. Getting from one place to another, which may be 32 miles, can take an hour and a half when, in other places, it only is 20 to 30 minutes. And so what we found was we started on time, and that people were present. And because of the pandemic, there were more fears and things that came up in our conversations. And so that sense of isolation that people were experiencing by sheltering in place, by coming together every week, we were able to speak to that. And really, we grew as a small group. We had already been, the small group that I'm a part of, we had already been meeting for like 6 years, but I think in this last 18 months, we have grown so close together because we were able to speak about our fears. The one thing I want to pick up that Bill brought up, everybody assumes that everybody has access to internet and equipment. And that was one of the areas that we found in our conference in some of our rural areas that they did not have. It wasn't a matter of having a computer, it was a matter of having the internet bandwidth in order to stay engaged in a Zoom gathering for an hour was somewhat impossible for some. And what that did was create advocacy within our churches to go out and say, how can we change this, not just for now, but going into the future? So I think we were able to advocate for those places where there was no internet to even use Zoom, and then also enhance our connectivity through Zoom. And I think our attendance actually got better. We had to change the time of the day we met. We did some logistic things, but I think that the small groups just got more powerful, and we invited more people. I don't know if you felt this, Bill, but
Yeah.
I had been saying, invite new people, invite new people. And when we were meeting face to face, nobody did that. And then the minute we went to, not a minute, but within time, they started bringing more of their friends and inviting more people to the small group, to the point we had to actually split off and become 2 groups instead of 1. So I think that's also a wonderful thing that happened during this time.
Oh, I would totally agree with that. One of the thing that was really surprising for me was the attendance. Attendance was so much better online, which you kind of say, well, of course, because what else could people do? But really, removing those barriers of having to run home, and when you have people that you're caring for or other things that you have to take care of, and then trying to get in your car and go wherever you need to go to get to your small group. When those are removed, the relaxation takes over. You just really, you get a much higher participation rate. It was great. And I also agree with Michelle in the sense that one of the things that really changed for our leaders was moving from a facilitator of curriculum to really a facilitator of care. There was a tremendous amount of pastoral care that our group leaders had to take on during this time, especially just like Michelle was saying, people's fears. People needed to talk about that, not only just wanted to talk about certain things, but they really needed to. And so, helping our small group leaders pivot into that kind of a realm, that can be scary for people, but it really it presented such a great opportunity for, I think, leaders to understand that their role can be so much more expansive, and to also see how much cohesiveness can really happen with the members of their group and within their participation as a care manager.
Well, in looking forward now to the fall, what are your expectations for participation in small groups in the fall?
That's a great question. I don't anticipate that we will see a decline. I think it's going to be the question that I have, which I can't answer right now, but I would love to, is what is the mix going to look like? How many people are really going to feel comfortable coming in person versus how many people will want to maybe remain virtual or have that mix of hybrid? And I don't know that I really truly don't believe that we necessarily have to have one over the other. I'm more committed to just making sure that somebody participates, that's able to participate, whether that is helping them get the right tools if it's an online, or feeling comfortable that we're following all the safety protocols in an in-person environment. I just want them to get connected. So my thing that I'm most a little apprehensive about, I guess, if I were to say that, is ensuring that we have enough group leaders, because I know that we'll probably have to have a more robust number of groups that are going to be able to be offered, whether that's, if I have double the amount because they're in person and online, we've got to get more leaders. And that's what we're trying to do right now during these summer months, is to tap into getting some new leaders.
Michelle, what's your small group going to do this fall?
I was going to say ditto, but it is also an opportunity for us to look at curriculum, but not curriculum. I think that Bill brings up a valuable point. Many folks are still in the model of let's teach our faith as opposed to let's experience our faith. And I believe that small groups are that place where we can experience faith together as we walk through our days. And yes, bring in the word and bring in our testimonies. But I think walking away a little bit from a curriculum that makes a facilitator just read the book versus being engaged and involved. And so that's where I see a shift for our small groups, that we won't always just have a book read that we're doing, that we're going to be engaged and involved. One of my best experiences in the small group was to hear the children in the background of many of my families who I never got to see them in the small group because they would come and it was all a grown up thing and la la la. And then we get to see each other as real people. So I'm hoping we will stay within this hybrid model. And yes, do more things together, plan lunches and dinners and family life things, but to take our faith to a place where more people can be engaged that don't just come to church on Sunday, because, that's not Wesleyan, kind of. I see the computer as John Wesley's horse, going from place to place, dropping the words, dropping the wisdom, and getting people engaged and involved, and then just going along the circuit and keeping it up. That's what I see the computer becoming for us.
Yeah. Well, in using that computer then within a small group setting, what does the kind of the digitally oriented small group gathering look like? What are some practices that you're putting in place to bring people together in a digital space?
We sing. We always sing. I've been doing a lot of things on, of course, the dismantling racism, and so bringing in other snippet videos, not lectures, but little snippet videos just for people to learn about the language that we're using, and then bringing it full circle into conversation around what this means to us as a people of faith. Just really, I think just being more intentional and being more real and not using what I've learned as a faith-based leader, a spiritual leader, to hide behind. I too am more authentic with in the group facilitation, because I've gone through a lot in the last 18 months.
Yeah, I think that's right, Michelle. I think for us, we've utilized, I have not sung, but we have utilized listening to music, meditation. People have done beginning with dinners together, all of things like that within the online environment. I think too that we're utilizers of Zoom, and so if I would say something for Michelle talked about being an advocacy for churches and church councils to really think about where they're going to be spending and investing money. That's another thing really that I would say, strongly consider getting a decent account when you go for any of the different providers, because for instance, in Zoom, you need to have a paid account to do breakout rooms. And you know what? Breakout rooms work great for us. A number of small groups are utilizing the breakout functions. And even if you have a group of 10 people, when you put 2 and 3 people together to pray for each other in that environment, that just it just creates a whole different element of people being able to open up. And if you rotate that every week, people really do get to know each other on a pretty intimate basis, which we associate all the time with being in person. But again, one of the things I heard at the very beginning of the pandemic when I was listening to podcasts on how to do all this, somebody who was studying online churches in the 90s said, being next to somebody or proximity is not a guarantee of community. And I think that that's so true. People can walk into a large church and be as anonymous. And so I think any of those types of tools that we can utilize to bring people together are great.
In this new reality of almost looking digitally first within small groups, or at least offering a digital component of small groups, how do you kind of base your small group consistency? Like, are they interest-based? Are you basing it off of a Bible study? Say we're going to go through the book of James, or how are these groups coalescing? Where are these people coming from?
I think it's a combination, which is to say that we've always kind of had groups that way. The truth of the matter is people are looking at it by day of week. because that's when their schedule, right? So if I'm a Tuesday person, I'm going to be, what groups are on Tuesday, and so we always try to have enough offerings that will allow for that. But I think interest is important. We have some groups that are meeting really what I would call almost like in an affinity, that are really into biking, that are runners, that are chefs, and they can get together and they utilize their time together in a slightly different way. They're not following a curriculum like Michelle was talking about, right? They may be following a passage of the Bible as a talking point, and then they're getting around, expanding into their area of interest. A sermon series is just a sermon discussion group is a great way for people to be able to meet, to talk, and to help really digest what they heard on a Sunday. And that can take place whether you heard it virtually or whether you heard that in person. So I think the key really is to, hopefully as many offerings as you can. But I do think traditional Bible studies are very important to people. And so we have to make sure that that we're offering those. Disciple is one of the ones that we offer. And we did that all virtually this past year. And 34 weeks online with a group is a long term. But I will tell you that everybody who graduated from that class was extremely happy that they did it. So, yeah.
Yeah, I love Bill, thank you for bringing up the infinity groups, because I really love that. We too have the same type of groups. We have a grief group that for folks that, have lost a loved one, and they come together for a period of time just to be able to express their grief in an environment where they feel safe. And then we have groups that, again, bicycle, cooking, parenting. There's a parenting small group that is really growing as parents change and grow. And those groups are amazing. And then the one I love is where we have a small group that connects with other small groups from other faiths. So it's an interfaith group that comes together. And I love that group because it brings just more about community and how do we serve the community as people of faith, and so that kind of stuff. And then there's a group that goes to the laundromats once a month and gives away money for folks to do their laundry who look like they need support and help. And that's what they do. And so it's just a variety. Every group, though, the element that we have in it is service. Mm-hmm. That even though the group may come together and do wonderful things together, within that, we will also find a place where we can serve outside of what already is being done at the church. And I think that is a great element, because you also grow when you do something together to benefit other people in the community. So I pretty much, Bill's model, or the model that he's described, is pretty much what we're doing in Cal Nevada as well. But I think it's this being together. I just can't emphasize enough. I've been going to church all my life. I've been a Methodist all my life. But the reality is, when you make something an exercise of practice and take away the pieces of it that make Bill important to me as a fellow Christian, sometimes in some spaces, church doesn't get there because people come in, and by the time the service is over, you may not even see them. Those are the people that leave before the benediction. They've come for the sermon and they're out, and you don't even know them. You have 3 services, or we had 3 services. And the 8 o'clock people don't know, the 10:30 people don't know and so I think also what small groups bring us to is that discipleship connection that is just as important as sitting beside somebody in a pew that you don't even know their name and you don't interact other than passing the collection plate. So I just think small groups are key to a person to their growth and discipleship.
Yeah, absolutely.
In thinking about the leadership for involved with these groups, how do you plan on training leaders moving forward?
Well, that's another excellent question. We do multiple trainings each year with our small group leaders, and we always tend to the basics because they always need to be emphasized. And so we do talk about what it means to be a leader of a group, and much of what we've been talking about this evening in terms of, it's not just curriculum, right? What is a role of a facilitator, and all of the things that you normally would train around with. How do you handle the person who talks all the time? How do you get the person who isn't talking? All of those types of group dynamic training, right? We do those. I think some of the other things that we've really focused on in this last year was how to pick up on and how to recognize people. And so not just about speaking about what have you read this week or what is your opinion, but really touching people in how are you? How is it with your soul? That was the question, right? That Wesley would ask. And I think that that's some of the things that we've been really trying to help our leaders get trained to get back into. We held three online virtual trainings during the pandemic that we offered them at different times. We videotaped them so we could give them to people who weren't able to potentially look at it or join us. And so there are a whole bunch of different ways. Again, what we've learned is there's not going to be one way. So it won't be just one training on a Sunday afternoon. It's going to be that it'll probably be videotaped. We'll probably have an online one as well. And also canvassing our leaders. What is it that they are up against? What is it that they really need help in? What is it that they want to see in terms of training? And that's really one of the things that you would think is very simple. And we do have leaders that will come forward, but it's the truth of this. A lot of people don't want to, I don't want to know. I don't want to cause a problem, so I don't want to ask about that. I think what this new landscape has really shown is that people are a lot more comfortable being around each other. And we are hearing from our leaders about areas that they really felt like, I need to, how do I reach out to people in a way that doesn't seem like I'm checking up on them? The answer was, hey, look, it's okay if you want to. People like to know that they're being checked up on, right? Mm-hmm. So those types of the things that we're training towards is just that. How do you create the community that discipleship can happen from that organically, if that makes sense?
Mm-hmm. And then with our groups, we have been meeting the fourth Saturday of every month and having a potluck dinner, training, and then communion together. So that was something that we were doing prior to the pandemic, that all of the small group leaders would come together during that time with our pastor and then have dinner, worship, communion, and then have a learning from each other about what we're learning. And we now have taken that online. So that's the difference. And I really appreciate that, because then I can hear, how Bill, what he's learning from his group, or what has been some of the areas of concern or any of that. And then sometimes best practices come out of all of that. But more importantly, we have grown together as a spiritual leadership of our church. And I think that is, that's priceless.
Yeah.
So Michelle, are you finding then that you're actually having kind of more touch points across leadership because of this new reality?
I think so. I think more, as Bill was saying, more honest conversations though around, there's this person in my group and they take all the air out of the group every time they speak because they bring politics in, or they're more, we're able to have those conversations in a way where we support that individual, but also then begin to think about ways that we can support the individual that does that in the group to grow in a spiritual way, because we also know when you grow in discipleship, it changes the way you look at things
Yeah.
in spite of. So I think that is the area in which we really are doing more of that kind of work, because it really means feeling safe. I think that's what I would say to most small group facilitators. It's about feeling safe. When I feel safe, I will share with you things. Confidentiality is so important in the group, expressing that. Particularly because I've heard some things that I know other congregation members don't know. And so how do you maintain that? Just teaching all of those things, that in a conversation, if you're going to describe something, you never say the person's name or their, yeah. So those things are so important to continue to bring up in the small group setting, so that facilitators know. And then looking for young, I got to make a plug, looking for young adults. I have a heart for young adults that are navigating their faith during this time. And how do we not use them as tokens and always saying, let's get a young adult for this, because the book of discipline or whatever, but really saying what Bill said, what interests you as a young adult, and what could we as a church help you bring a group to the church, and use our space, use our tools in a way, and then let them do it. And stop interfering, and stop making it try to look like the groups that we as older people navigate, and let's see if that would be a challenge I would lift up from this time. I don't know, Bill, how you feel about that, but I just feel like our young adults have so much to teach us, and we still don't have enough of them doing small groups and leadership.
I would absolutely second that. I resonate with that. And the tokening of young adults is something that we're guilty of, quite frankly. Not just at our church. I think that it's just something. And that's out of an abundance of desire to have people get involved. The truth of the matter is we don't have in numbers as many young adults. So there is kind of this pent up desire to get them involved in so many different ways. But I think what Michelle said was really important, and that is it looks different for them. It really does. They have, and they're capable people. And so sometimes if we just get out of the way, things can happen. And I think that that's true for groups as a whole. There isn't just one way. Wow, has the pandemic showed us that there are multiple ways to get to where we all want to go. And so if there's anything a challenge is going to be, is to kind of keep that entrepreneurial spirit, if you will, to keep that openness, to be able to try things and not worry about whether it fails or not. That it's just more important to try. Big is not always better, and I think we've learned a lot of that in this past year. So I agree with everything that Michelle was saying.
It's so valuable to hear these stories of growth, because when we think about the past 18 months, a lot of us feel a sense of apprehension because things are changing, and that's fear inspiring for many of us. So it's great to be grounded in this idea of, yeah, things are changing, and there is some benefit to that. In fact, there are spots of growth that we can pinpoint. So I thank you both, Michelle and Bill, for bringing those up. As we look to the future and where people are getting involved this fall and beyond, what do you get a sense of people are expecting from churches moving forward? What kind of expectations are they holding for us in leadership?
Well, I would think we've done a few different surveys in our congregation throughout this time. And I would say that one of our biggest commitments from the get-go was safety. Safety of children, safety of those that are compromised, and I would say stepping up to being the champions of that. And so I really think that our our congregation, I truly believe that our church, and I don't think it's just our church. I think it's churches in general, that there's a trust level. And I believe that, we've really been a very effective partner in terms of establishing trust with our community and the people who have, interacted with us. And so I think, number one, they expect us to continue that. As much as we all want the shifting sands to kind of settle, right? I think that's number one. I think the other thing that people have realized is that our lead pastor and our pastoral staff are not superhuman. That there has been I think a shift in terms of understanding, and maybe seeing our staff, our church staff, especially our pastors, more as finite individuals that are going through the same things that we are too, which I think has been really, really positive. It's created a different level of understanding, I think, in the people who interact with the pastoral staff. I think flexibility is just one of those things that if there is one word that we're continuing to launch into even this new September, right? It's going to be our favorite phrase at our church is "at this time," because we realize that it could change at any time. And that's really hard for people who love control. And the truth is the matter. We just have to focus on what we can control, and that we can't, we've got to give to God and hope that, that we do the right thing. So I think that's for me, that's what I'm thinking our congregation is expecting from from their leadership team.
And we've had a little bit of a push to get back to normal. People wanted our churches to be open before the state was ready. They wanted to be able to sing and without mask. And again, as the conference lay leader, as well as a public health person here in the state of California, I was like, no, we can't do that. And so just really helping them, being leaders. I think Bill's point is one that I will say to all churches, is that we have to be the leaders that are not wishy-washy for all the right reasons. And so when we say, we want to keep people safe, we want the children to come back, but we need to make sure they're safe. And you have to trust us because we have walked with you through this journey for the last 18 months, and we want to continue to keep all of you safe. But we also want to figure out ways to be renewed and to live out our faith with each other. I'm hoping that we have learned how to have discussions with each other in this platform, because we're going to need this virtual platform to continue to have the courageous conversations that the future is going to demand of us. And so that's where I see the fall coming, that we have many new changes, many new things. And I think that the folks are asking the church to stand up for them so that they can walk without the fear that we walked into this pandemic with, so that we can be the change, of course, that we want to see on this earth. So that's where I see small groups, just this whole hybrid model of how we do church. And saying to those people that haven't come into our buildings, it's okay, because we're going to come to you. We're either going to come to you through virtual means, or we're going to walk out of our churches and come to you. I think that the I don't know how to say this, but the zeal to run back into the building, I get it. I love my building. I love my church. I love seeing, but let's be careful not to just make that the only place that we run into with zeal. Let's run into the hybrid model with zeal. Let's run out physical with zeal, and then also open the doors of the church with zeal, because we can't just be one thing, because we're not just one people in the sense of what we need and how we spiritually grow.
Yeah, well, Michelle, that is a benediction right there. We've been sent as we're looking into the future. Thank you both so much, Bill and Michelle, for giving us an idea of what we can expect as we move ahead, especially as we look ahead with an eye towards growth and a heart towards growth. So again, thank you both, Bill and Michelle, for joining us. It was incredibly valuable time, and just very appreciative of you both offering your time and insight.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you, audience member, for joining us in this session from Amplify Media. Please join us again on Thursday for our second episode, where we're going to continue this discussion with Brandon Baxter and Melanie Hill. And you'll now be able to watch this particular episode, in case you missed a little part of it, on demand at Amplify. If you've not already, subscribe to Amplify Media's Facebook and YouTube pages to watch future webinars just like this one. And thank you to Amplify Media, of course, for sponsoring this series. Stick around for a few seconds to learn more about the streaming resources and other tools that they provide churches and small groups to help them connect online. Have a wonderful day. Thanks again.